Existentialism is not just a philosophy. It is a confrontation with reality itself. It is the recognition that life, in its rawest form, presents no inherent meaning, no divine blueprint, and no predetermined purpose. Yet, within this vast emptiness, it also offers something profound: absolute freedom. Freedom to define one's own existence, to carve meaning out of nothingness, and to take responsibility for one's choices without the comfort of external validation. At its core, existentialism is about the individual, unlike other philosophical traditions that seek universal truths or divine orders. Existentialism tells us that meaning is personal, subjective, and ever-changing. It does not exist outside of us, but is something we must actively create. This realization can be terrifying. It means that there is no grand narrative guiding our lives, no cosmic force ensuring that we make the right choices. The responsibility for our existence lies entirely on our shoulders. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the leading figures of existentialism, famously stated, "Existence precedes essence." What does this mean? It means that we are not born with a predetermined purpose or essence, unlike a tool, which is created for a specific function. A human being is thrown into the world without a predefined meaning. Only through our actions, our choices, and our experiences do we define who we are. There is no external judge deciding our fate, only us. But this freedom comes with a cost: anguish. The realization that we alone are responsible for shaping our destiny can be overwhelming. Many seek to escape this burden by conforming to societal norms, adopting ready-made beliefs, or surrendering their freedom to institutions, ideologies, or religions. But existentialism calls this bad faith, the act of deceiving oneself into believing that one's choices are dictated by external forces rather than personal responsibility. Søren Kierkegaard, often considered the father of existentialism, spoke of the individual's struggle with despair. He saw despair as the result of not living authentically, of failing to embrace one's true self. For Kierkegaard, the solution was not to seek meaning in external authorities, but to take a leap of faith, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in the sense of choosing to live with commitment and passion despite uncertainty. Friedrich Nietzsche, another key figure, took this idea further. He declared, "God is dead," but Nietzsche did not mean this literally. He meant that in the modern world, traditional values, religious beliefs, and absolute moral codes had lost their power. Humanity was now faced with a terrifying question: without a divine order, how do we determine what is right and wrong? This was both a crisis and an opportunity, a chance to create new values, to rise beyond outdated systems, and to embrace the potential of becoming something greater. But with this newfound freedom comes the absurd. Albert Camus, a philosopher often associated with existentialism, described life as fundamentally absurd. We seek meaning in a universe that offers none. We ask for answers where there are only questions. Camus used the myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, as a metaphor for human existence. But Camus did not see this as hopeless. Instead, he argued that we must embrace the absurd, rebel against meaninglessness, and find joy in the struggle itself. In his words, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Existentialism does not offer easy answers. It does not provide a doctrine to follow or a final destination to reach. Instead, it challenges us to confront the raw reality of existence and to take responsibility for our lives, to live authentically, to embrace freedom, to create meaning even in a meaningless world. In this journey, we will explore the depths of existentialist thought, its origins, its evolution, and its implications for how we live today. From the despair of Kierkegaard to the radical freedom of Sartre, from Nietzsche's call for self-overcoming to Camus' embrace of the absurd, we will dive into the philosophy that has reshaped our understanding of what it means to exist. The world is a vast and indifferent place. It does not offer inherent meaning, nor does it provide clear guidance on what one must do. The existentialist begins with this realization that life itself is devoid of intrinsic purpose, and it is up to the individual to create their own. There is no divine script, no preordained plan, no cosmic force ensuring that things unfold in a just or meaningful manner. The universe simply is. It exists without concern for our joys or sufferings, and within this realization, one finds the foundation of existentialist thought. To face this truth is unsettling. It strips away the comforting illusions of an ordered world and leaves one standing before the abyss of freedom. This is what existentialist thinkers have grappled with for centuries: the confrontation with nothingness and the responsibility that follows. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most prominent existentialists, declared that humans are condemned to be free. There is no higher power dictating our choices, no essential nature that determines what we must become. We are born into a world without meaning, and it is entirely up to us to define ourselves. This freedom is both exhilarating and terrifying. The idea of radical freedom challenges everything. If one is truly free, then every action, every decision, every path in life is chosen, not imposed. It means that we cannot blame fate, destiny, or even external circumstances for the way our lives unfold. We are responsible for what we make of ourselves. This is the core of Sartre's philosophy. Existence precedes essence, unlike a tool or an object, which is created with a predetermined purpose. Humans are born without inherent meaning. Our essence, who we are, comes only after we begin to act, to make choices, to define ourselves through our actions. But this freedom comes with a burden. If nothing is predetermined, if no higher order assigns purpose to our lives, then every choice we make carries immense weight. The existentialist recognizes that there is no escape from this responsibility. One cannot simply follow societal conventions or accept handed-down beliefs without question. To do so is to live in what Sartre calls bad faith, the denial of one's own freedom, the refusal to take ownership of one's choices. Those who live in bad faith hide behind excuses. They say they had no choice, that they were forced into their situation, that their actions were dictated by external forces. But the existentialist calls this a lie. There is always a choice, and we must own it. Yet, taking full responsibility for one's life can be overwhelming without a predefined meaning, without an external structure to rely on. Many face the existential crisis, a deep, unsettling realization of life's apparent meaninglessness. This can lead to despair, anxiety, or even nihilism, where one believes that nothing matters at all. But existentialism does not stop at this point. It does not end in hopelessness. Instead, it challenges the individual to create meaning from within. If there is no inherent purpose, then we must invent our own. We must decide what matters and live according to those values. This is where figures like Albert Camus introduce the concept of the absurd. Camus acknowledges that the human mind seeks meaning, yet the universe provides none. This creates an absurd contradiction: our endless search for meaning in a meaningless world. But rather than falling into despair, Camus argues that we should embrace the absurd. If life has no given purpose, we are free to create our own. The absurd hero, like Sisyphus eternally pushing his boulder up the hill, defies the universe by continuing to live, to act, to create meaning despite its absence. This idea is echoed in Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or the overman. Nietzsche rejected the notion of objective morality, arguing that traditional values had collapsed. He famously declared that God is dead, meaning that humanity could no longer rely on religion to provide meaning. Instead, Nietzsche called upon individuals to rise above nihilism and create their own values. The Übermensch does not passively accept meaning from society, religion, or tradition. He shapes his own destiny, forging meaning through his will. But this is not easy. To embrace existentialist thought fully is to reject comfortable illusions. It is to stand alone in an indifferent universe and take responsibility for defining oneself. It requires courage, for there is no safety net, no guarantee of success, no promise of an afterlife that will redeem all suffering. And yet, there is a strange liberation in this. If nothing is predetermined, if there is no ultimate meaning imposed upon us, then we are truly free. We are free to explore, to create, to experience, to love, to struggle, and to define ourselves on our own terms. As we move forward in this exploration of existentialism, we will delve deeper into its key thinkers, its major themes, and its profound implications on how we live. The journey ahead is not one of easy answers or comforting truths, but of deep questioning and self-discovery. To engage with existentialism is to confront the fundamental nature of human existence, and in doing so, to begin the task of shaping one's own meaning in a world that offers none. The weight of existence is an inescapable reality. From the moment we become conscious of our place in the world, we are faced with the question, what does it mean to live? Existentialist thought does not provide a singular answer, but it forces us to confront the responsibility that comes with being alive. To live authentically, we must reject illusions and embrace our freedom, no matter how terrifying it may be. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans suffer from what he called nausea, a profound discomfort that arises when we realize the world has no inherent meaning. This is not a passing feeling of sadness or despair, but a deep, visceral confrontation with nothingness. When we strip away all the structures, rules, and expectations imposed by society, what remains? Just a raw existence, an empty canvas waiting to be filled. Sartre argued that this realization is both horrifying and liberating. In the absence of meaning, we gain the freedom to create our own. But the problem is that most people are not ready for this level of freedom. They seek comfort in pre-existing systems, religion, societal norms, cultural traditions, anything that can relieve them of the burden of creating meaning for themselves. This leads to what Sartre calls bad faith, the act of deceiving oneself to avoid the weight of responsibility. It is easier to believe that we are defined by our roles in society, by our relationships, by external forces beyond our control. But to live in bad faith is to live a lie. It is to surrender one's freedom in exchange for the illusion of certainty. Take, for example, the person who claims they have no choice but to follow a path laid out for them, whether in their career, their relationships, or their beliefs. Sartre would argue that this is an excuse. Every action, every decision is ultimately a choice, even in the face of external pressures. To say, I had no choice, is to deny one's own agency, and yet, true freedom is frightening. Without external meaning, without a higher authority dictating our purpose, we are left to define ourselves. This is why existentialism is not just a philosophy, but a way of living. It demands radical responsibility. Albert Camus, though closely associated with existentialism, took a slightly different approach. He spoke of the absurd, the tension between human beings who seek meaning and a universe that offers none. Camus argued that life is inherently absurd, and the greatest question we face is whether or not we should continue living despite this absurdity. In his famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, he describes the Greek figure condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. For Camus, this is the perfect metaphor for human existence. Life is repetitive, often meaningless, and yet we continue. But Camus does not suggest we give in to despair. Instead, he offers a radical solution. We must embrace the absurd. We must acknowledge that life has no given meaning, and yet still find joy in living. The absurd hero, like Sisyphus, accepts his fate but refuses to surrender to despair. He pushes the rock not because he believes in an ultimate purpose, but because he chooses to. In this act of defiance, he becomes truly free. This idea of embracing the absurd ties into the concept of authenticity. A key theme in existentialist thought. To live authentically is to accept reality as it is and still create meaning on one's own terms. This means acting in accordance with one's own values, rather than conforming to external expectations. It means recognizing that we are always in the process of becoming. We are never fixed, never fully defined. Every day, every moment, we shape our identity through our choices. Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, or the overman, aligns with this idea. Nietzsche saw traditional morality as restrictive, holding individuals back from reaching their full potential. When he declared that God is dead, he did not mean this in a literal sense, but as a metaphor for the collapse of absolute truths without a divine authority dictating right and wrong. Humanity must create its own values. The Übermensch is the individual who rises above conventional morality and forges their own path, free from societal constraints. But this path is not easy. To truly embrace existentialism, one must be willing to accept suffering, uncertainty, and isolation. Many existentialist thinkers, including Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard, explored the deep loneliness that comes with rejecting traditional structures. Kierkegaard, considered the father of existentialism, believed that true freedom leads to dread a paralyzing anxiety in the face of infinite possibilities, but he also saw this dread as a gateway to true self-discovery. Only by confronting our fears, by embracing the uncertainty of existence, can we live authentically. Existentialism does not promise happiness in a conventional sense. It does not offer comforting answers or a clear path to fulfillment. Instead, it challenges us to take control of our own existence, to embrace the unknown, and to create meaning where none is given. This is a difficult path, but it is also the most liberating. When we stop seeking external validation, when we stop waiting for life to hand us meaning, we become truly free. In the next part, we will explore the implications of existentialism on morality, relationships, and the way we engage with the world. We will dive deeper into the idea of radical responsibility, the rejection of predetermined meaning, and how existentialist thought can shape our understanding of love, fear, and purpose. Existence is not something that happens to us, it is something we create. Existence is a paradox. We are thrown into a world we did not choose, bound by time and mortality, yet given the freedom to define ourselves. This contradiction is at the core of existentialist thought. If life has no inherent meaning, and yet we are condemned to live, then what should we do with our existence? The answer, according to existentialist philosophers, is not to escape the absurdity of life, but to embrace it fully. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence, a radical idea that challenges the traditional belief that humans have a predetermined nature or purpose. In religious and philosophical traditions before existentialism, it was often assumed that people were born with a fixed essence, whether determined by God, nature, or reason. But Sartre rejected this notion. According to him, we are born as blank slates, and only through our choices and actions do we create our identity. In other words, we are what we do. This idea carries immense weight because it means that we are responsible for who we become. There is no destiny, no cosmic plan, no higher power shaping us. We are entirely responsible for shaping ourselves. This can be both exhilarating and terrifying. Many people would rather believe that they are simply playing a predetermined role in life, following a script written by fate. But existentialism rejects this illusion. We are not characters in a story. We are the authors of our own lives. However, this freedom comes with anguish. Sartre describes this feeling as the burden of absolute responsibility, a realization that every decision we make defines us, and we alone bear the consequences. There is no escape from this responsibility. Even choosing not to choose is a choice in itself. This is why Sartre says, we are condemned to be free. Freedom is not a gift, it is a weight we must carry throughout our lives. Many people try to escape this responsibility by conforming to societal roles, adopting beliefs without questioning them, or convincing themselves that they have no control over their lives. This is what Sartre calls bad faith, the self-deception of pretending that we are not free. A person who says, I have no choice but to follow this path, is lying to themselves. They are trying to escape the anxiety of freedom by surrendering to external forces. But Sartre warns that living in bad faith is a form of self-betrayal. It means denying one's own potential, refusing to take ownership of one's life. True authenticity comes only when we accept the weight of our freedom, make choices consciously, and take full responsibility for our existence. This is not easy. It requires courage to live without excuses, to acknowledge that we are the sole creators of our meaning. Albert Camus expands on this idea with his concept of the absurd. Camus describes human life as a continuous search for meaning in a universe that offers none. He sees this as a conflict between two forces, our desire for purpose and the indifferent, meaningless nature of reality. This tension creates a sense of absurdity, the feeling that life is both significant and insignificant at the same time. Camus argues that this absurdity cannot be resolved. We can never truly find an objective meaning to existence, but instead of despairing, Camus suggests that we should rebel against the absurd. His famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, illustrates this perfectly. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus is condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll back down each time he reaches the top. At first glance, this seems like a metaphor for pointless suffering, but Camus sees something else in this story. He sees defiance. Sisyphus, though trapped in an endless cycle, does not surrender to despair. He accepts his fate and chooses to keep pushing the boulder. In this choice, he finds a kind of freedom. Camus famously concludes, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy. The absurd hero does not seek external meaning, he creates his own purpose by embracing life as it is." This concept ties into the idea of authentic living, to live authentically. According to existentialist thinkers, is to fully embrace the reality of existence without illusions. It means confronting death, suffering, and uncertainty without seeking false comfort. It means choosing one's own path rather than following the expectations of others. Friedrich Nietzsche takes this idea even further with his concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superman. Nietzsche believed that traditional morality, particularly religious morality, was designed to control and limit human potential. He declared that God is dead, not in a literal sense, but as a statement that traditional values had lost their power in the modern world. In the absence of divine authority, humans must create their own values. The Übermensch is the individual who rises above conventional morality and forges their own path. This person does not seek external validation, does not follow societal norms blindly, and does not live in fear of judgment. Instead, they embrace their desires, their will, and their creative power to shape their own destiny. The Übermensch does not ask, "What should I do?" but rather, "What do I choose to become?" However, this path is difficult and requires immense strength. Most people fear true freedom because it requires them to take full responsibility for their existence. It is far easier to follow the crowd, to conform, to live within the comfort of ready-made beliefs. But existentialist thought insists that true fulfillment comes only from self-overcoming, from constantly pushing oneself beyond limitations, beyond fear, beyond convention. Kierkegaard, often considered the first existentialist, saw this struggle as deeply personal. He believed that each individual must confront the anxiety of existence alone. Unlike Nietzsche, he did not reject religion entirely, but he saw faith as an intensely personal choice, one that must be made in the face of doubt. For Kierkegaard, true faith was not about following religious doctrine, but about embracing uncertainty and choosing to believe despite the absence of guarantees. This brings us to a central existentialist dilemma. How should we live knowing that everything is uncertain? If there is no ultimate truth, no absolute morality, and no predetermined purpose, then what stops life from descending into chaos? The existentialist answer is simple. We must create our own meaning. We must choose our values, our beliefs, our purpose, not because they are given to us, but because we decide they matter. This is not a passive process. It is an ongoing act of creation. Every choice we make shapes our reality. Every action we take defines who we are. There is no fixed essence, only the continuous unfolding of existence. In the next part, we will explore how existentialism applies to everyday life, how it influences our relationships, our work, our fears, and our search for happiness. We will examine what it means to love authentically, to face death without fear, and to build a life based on personal truth rather than societal expectations. Existence is not a puzzle to be solved, but a canvas to be painted. Life unfolds in uncertainty. Every day, we wake up not knowing what the future holds, not knowing if the choices we make will lead to fulfillment or regret. This uncertainty is an unavoidable part of existence, and existentialist philosophy does not seek to eliminate it. Instead, it encourages us to embrace uncertainty as a fundamental aspect of being human. In doing so, we find the freedom to create meaning, even in the face of life's unpredictability. One of the most profound challenges of existentialist thought is its rejection of absolute meaning. Human beings have a deep psychological need for structure. We seek purpose in religion, morality, relationships, and work. But existentialist philosophers argue that these structures are not inherent. They are human-made. This realization can feel liberating for some and terrifying for others. If meaning is not given to us, then we must create it ourselves. A central idea of existentialism is authenticity. the practice of living in accordance with one's own values rather than conforming to societal expectations. Jean-Paul Sartre, in his discussions on freedom and bad faith, argued that most people do not live authentically. Instead, they follow paths laid out by others, whether by religion, culture, or societal norms, without questioning if those paths truly align with their inner self. Sartre's concept of bad faith describes the self-deception involved in denying one's own freedom. When we convince ourselves that we have no choice in life, that we are merely fulfilling a role assigned to us by society, we are engaging in bad faith. For example, someone who hates their job but continues working there simply because that's how life is living in bad faith. They are avoiding the responsibility of change by telling themselves they have no other options. Living authentically requires confronting difficult questions about what we truly value and whether our choices are based on personal beliefs or simply a response to external expectations. Authenticity is not about selfishness or rebellion for the sake of it. It is about honest self-examination and the courage to live according to one's own truth. With great freedom comes great responsibility. Existentialist thought insists that we are radically free. But this freedom is not without consequences. Every choice we make shapes our reality, and this awareness brings with it a deep sense of anxiety. Nietzsche and Kierkegaard described this as the dizziness of freedom, the unsettling realization that we alone are responsible for our actions and their outcomes. He compared it to standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling both the fear of falling and the strange urge to jump. This paradox illustrates the human experience of freedom. We are terrified by our own power to shape our lives. This anxiety can manifest in many ways. Some people avoid making difficult choices, postponing decisions indefinitely. Others seek external authorities, religion, ideology, societal norms to dictate their actions, so they don't have to bear the responsibility themselves. But existentialism teaches that rather than fearing anxiety, we should embrace it as a sign of our freedom. Anxiety is not something to escape. It is something to accept. It is proof that we are truly alive, fully aware of our ability to choose. Albert Camus, although often considered separate from existentialist philosophers, explored similar themes, particularly in his idea of the absurd. Camus argued that humans have an unshakable need for meaning, yet the universe offers none. This contradiction creates what he calls the absurd condition. Most people respond to this condition in one of three ways. They either cling to religious or ideological systems that claim to provide ultimate meaning, fall into nihilism by believing that because life has no inherent purpose, nothing matters, or they accept the absurd and choose to live in defiance of it. Camus champions the third response. He believes that instead of searching for external meaning, we should embrace life as it is and find joy in the act of living itself. His idea of the absurd hero is someone who, like Sisyphus, accepts the pointlessness of their struggle, but continues to live passionately anyway. This philosophy does not require abandoning all values or ambitions. Instead, it encourages us to create our own meaning in a world that offers none. A person who chooses to dedicate their life to art, love, or knowledge is not doing so because these pursuits have inherent meaning, but because they choose to make them meaningful. Love is often seen as one of the most profound sources of meaning in human life, but existentialist philosophers question whether traditional notions of love are compatible with radical freedom. Simone de Beauvoir, one of the most influential existentialist thinkers, explored the concept of authentic love. She argued that love should not be about possession or dependence, but about two individuals supporting each other's freedom. Many relationships fail, she believed, because people expect their partner to provide them with meaning. This is a dangerous illusion. If we place our purpose in someone else, we risk losing our own identity. Authentic love, according to existentialism, is a relationship in which both people respect each other's autonomy while choosing to share their lives. It is not about completing each other, but about growing together without sacrificing individuality. All existentialist philosophy eventually leads to the question of death. If life is short, fragile, and without inherent meaning, how should we face our mortality? Many philosophies and religions offer the promise of an afterlife, a way to extend meaning beyond death. But existentialists argue that we should accept the finality of death rather than fearing it. Martin Heidegger, in his book Being and Time, describes being toward death as an essential part of authentic existence, according to him. People often live in denial of their mortality, avoiding thoughts of death by distracting themselves with everyday concerns. But true freedom comes from fully accepting death as inevitable and living in a way that reflects this awareness. This does not mean living in fear, but rather living with urgency and intentionality. If we understand that life is temporary, we become more conscious of how we spend our time. Every moment, every relationship, every choice becomes more significant. Happiness, in existentialist terms, is not about external success, pleasure, or comfort. It is about living authentically, embracing freedom, and creating personal meaning. This kind of happiness is not always joyful, it is often difficult, full of struggle and uncertainty, but it is deeply fulfilling. Nietzsche's idea of amor fati, the love of fate, captures this mindset perfectly. He believed that we should not only accept life's difficulties, but learn to love them. Instead of wishing for a different life, we should embrace everything that happens, good or bad, as part of our personal journey. This approach transforms suffering into something meaningful. Instead of seeing hardship as an obstacle to happiness, we see it as an essential part of growth. The person who lives this way does not ask how they can avoid suffering, but rather how they can use their suffering to create something meaningful. Existentialism does not offer a single answer to life's biggest questions. Instead, it teaches us how to approach these questions with honesty, courage, and responsibility. It challenges us to stop waiting for external meaning and start creating our own meaning. To live existentially is to fully embrace freedom, to take responsibility for one's existence, and to live with intention. It is a philosophy not of despair, but of empowerment, because in a world without predetermined meaning, everything we do matters precisely because we choose it. In modern society, existentialism faces new challenges that earlier philosophers could not have predicted. The rapid rise of technology, the influence of social media, and the overwhelming access to information have dramatically changed how people experience life, identity, and freedom. The core existentialist themes of authenticity, anxiety, and meaning-making are more relevant than ever as people navigate a world that constantly demands attention, comparison, and validation. One of the central ideas of existentialism is the importance of making one's own choices and taking responsibility for them. But in today's digital world, people are bombarded with influences that shape their decisions in subtle and often unnoticed ways. Social media algorithms track behavior, suggest content, and create personalized experiences that reinforce existing beliefs while limiting exposure to diverse perspectives. This can make it difficult to think independently, as individuals are continuously influenced by the digital environments they engage with. Sartre's concept of bad faith, where individuals deceive themselves into believing they are not truly free, takes on new meaning in the digital age. Many people live through carefully curated online personas, presenting themselves in a way that conforms to societal expectations rather than reflecting their true selves. The pressure to gain approval through likes, comments, and shares can lead people to live inauthentic lives, prioritizing external validation over personal fulfillment. Instead of making choices based on genuine desires, individuals may conform to trends or adopt beliefs that make them feel accepted within their social circles. This phenomenon creates an existential paradox. The internet offers unlimited freedom of expression, yet many people feel more constrained than ever. The fear of judgment, cancellation, or social rejection can prevent individuals from expressing their true thoughts or exploring unconventional ideas. In a world where every action can be recorded, analyzed, and criticized, the anxiety of choice becomes even more intense. Technology has also transformed the way people experience time and existence. Existentialist philosophers emphasize the importance of living in the present and engaging with life fully. But modern distractions make this increasingly difficult. Endless scrolling, notifications, and constant connectivity pull people away from the moment, creating a fragmented sense of reality. Instead of experiencing life directly, many people experience it through screens, reducing their connection to the physical world and their own inner thoughts. Kierkegaard warned about the dangers of distraction, arguing that people often avoid confronting deeper existential questions by immersing themselves in superficial concerns. In the digital age, distraction has become more pervasive than ever. The fear of missing out, FOMO, and the addiction to instant gratification can prevent individuals from reflecting on their lives, making intentional choices, and confronting the reality of their existence. Camus' concept of the absurd, the contradiction between human beings' desire for meaning and the universe's indifference, has also evolved in the modern context. The sheer amount of information available can create an illusion of knowledge while deepening the sense of existential confusion. People have access to more knowledge than ever before, yet many feel lost, overwhelmed, and uncertain about their place in the world. The search for meaning has become a constant struggle, as individuals are faced with infinite possibilities, conflicting ideologies, and an endless stream of opinions. Despite these challenges, existentialist philosophy offers valuable insights into how to navigate modern life. One of the key lessons is the importance of intentional living. Heidegger's idea of being toward death reminds us that life is finite, and our time should be spent on what truly matters. This means actively choosing how to spend time, setting personal goals, and focusing on experiences that bring genuine fulfillment. Authenticity remains one of the most powerful tools for overcoming existential anxiety in the digital age. To live authentically is to make choices based on one's true self, rather than external pressures. This requires deep self-reflection and the willingness to embrace one's individuality, even when it goes against societal expectations. The challenge is to resist the temptation of conformity and instead pursue paths that align with personal values. Another essential practice is mindfulness, the ability to be present and engaged in life. Existentialism teaches that meaning is not something to be found in abstract theories, but something to be created through everyday actions. By focusing on direct experiences, relationships, and personal growth, individuals can cultivate a sense of purpose that is rooted in reality, rather than external validation. The idea of absurd joy, as proposed by Camus, also offers a way forward. Instead of searching for a grand, all-encompassing meaning, people can find fulfillment in small, everyday moments, a walk in nature, a meaningful conversation. The act of creating something new, these simple experiences, can provide a sense of connection and joy. The key is to embrace the absurd, to live passionately despite life's uncertainties, and to take responsibility for one's own happiness. Existentialist themes are also deeply relevant in discussions about work and fulfillment. Many people struggle with feelings of emptiness in their jobs, experiencing work as a meaningless routine rather than a source of purpose. Sartre's ideas about freedom and responsibility suggest that individuals should actively shape their professional lives rather than passively accepting dissatisfaction. This does not necessarily mean quitting a job or chasing grand ambitions. It can mean finding ways to bring personal meaning into any work, engaging with tasks more consciously, or seeking out projects that align with one's values. Simone de Beauvoir's existentialist feminism also remains significant today. She argued that freedom should not only be recognized, but actively pursued. Many modern discussions about gender equality, self-identity, and personal autonomy are deeply connected to existentialist principles. The idea that one is not born, but becomes oneself applies to all aspects of identity. The challenge is to create a life that reflects personal choices rather than societal impositions. In a world dominated by artificial intelligence, automation, and rapid technological change, existentialist thought reminds us of the importance of human agency. While AI can process information and predict patterns, it does not experience consciousness, emotions, or the burden of choice. Existentialism highlights the uniqueness of human existence, the ability to reflect, doubt, and shape one's own reality. The philosophy of existentialism does not provide simple answers. It does not promise a universal path to happiness, nor does it offer comforting illusions about fate or destiny. Instead, it presents a challenge to embrace freedom fully, to confront the weight of responsibility, and to create a life of meaning despite uncertainty. By understanding existentialist ideas, individuals can navigate modern life with greater awareness and intentionality. They can resist the passive flow of external influences and take active control over their thoughts, actions, and experiences. They can find fulfillment not in grand theories or external rewards, but in the act of living itself. Existentialist philosophy has deeply influenced literature, art, and film, shaping the way stories are told and how characters are developed through creative expression. Existentialist ideas take on new dimensions, allowing audiences to experience the struggles of meaning, freedom, and authenticity in a deeply personal way. Literature, in particular, has been a powerful medium for exploring existentialist themes, as it allows for introspection, inner monologues, and the detailed portrayal of human anxieties. One of the most famous existentialist novels is Albert Camus' The Stranger. The protagonist, Musso, embodies the absurd hero, someone who lives life without attaching meaning to it. His indifferent attitude toward life, love, and even death reflects the existentialist belief that meaning is not inherent but must be created. When he is put on trial for a crime, it becomes clear that society expects him to conform to certain emotional and moral standards. His refusal to do so marks him as an outsider, someone who does not fit into the structured expectations of the world. Through this, Camus illustrates the conflict between individual authenticity and social norms, a key struggle in existentialist thought. Similarly, Jean-Paul Sartre's Nietzsche presents an intense exploration of existential dread. The protagonist, Antoine Roquentin, experiences a deep sense of discomfort and alienation from the world around him. Everyday objects, routines, and even his own past seem meaningless, leading him to question the nature of existence itself. Through Roquentin's experiences, Sartre explores the idea that reality is not neatly structured but rather chaotic, and that individuals must come to terms with this absurdity rather than seeking artificial comfort. Another key existentialist work is Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Although Dostoevsky wrote before existentialism became a formal philosophical movement, his ideas laid the foundation for many later thinkers. The narrator of the novel, an unnamed man living in isolation, rejects social conventions and embraces his own suffering. He argues that human beings are not merely rational creatures who seek happiness, but are often driven by self-destructive impulses. This challenges the idea that life has a clear purpose or that human beings are naturally inclined toward progress. Instead, it presents the existentialist idea that people must take full responsibility for their own nature, even if it means embracing the darker aspects of their existence. Similarly, Francis Bacon's paintings depict distorted human figures trapped in chaotic spaces, reflecting the existentialist view that existence is often marked by confusion, isolation, and an absence of clear meaning. His artwork captures the sense of unease that arises when individuals are forced to confront their own mortality and the randomness of life. Music, too, can carry existentialist themes. Many songwriters and composers explore themes of isolation, freedom, and the search for meaning. Pink Floyd's The Wall tells the story of an individual who isolates himself from society, building a metaphorical wall around himself to escape pain. The album explores themes of alienation, self-reflection, and the consequences of disconnecting from the world. In literature, film, art, and music, existentialist ideas continue to shape creative expression. These mediums provide a space for individuals to confront difficult questions about life, identity, and purpose. They do not necessarily offer answers, but rather present a reflection of the struggles that define human existence. Through storytelling and artistic representation, existentialist philosophy becomes more than an intellectual exercise. It becomes an emotional and experiential journey. One of the reasons existentialism remains relevant in art and media is that it resonates with the fundamental experiences of modern life. People continue to grapple with questions of identity, purpose, and freedom in a rapidly changing world. The challenges of the digital age, social expectations, and technological advancements only amplify the need for existentialist reflection. As we move further into the 21st century, existentialist thought will likely continue to evolve. New forms of storytelling, including virtual reality and interactive media, may offer new ways to explore the philosophy's core themes. Whether through literature, film, music, or digital art, the existentialist search for meaning in an indifferent universe remains a timeless and deeply human pursuit. Existentialism challenges us to confront the stark reality of our own existence. It is a philosophy that does not offer comfort, but instead forces us to accept responsibility for our choices, our freedom, and ultimately, the meaning we construct in our lives. As we delve deeper, we encounter the tension between individuality and the world around us. Existentialist thinkers argue that society often pressures us to conform, to adopt roles, to follow traditions without questioning their validity. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most influential existentialists, famously declared that existence precedes essence, meaning that we are not born with a predetermined purpose, we must create it ourselves. This idea is both liberating and terrifying. It means that we are not bound by fate, but it also means that we cannot escape the burden of making choices. Albert Camus, another major figure in existentialism, explored the idea of the absurd, the conflict between our desire for meaning and the universe's indifference to our existence. He used the myth of Sisyphus as a metaphor for human life. Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, finds himself trapped in a meaningless cycle. Yet, Camus suggests that Sisyphus can find a form of happiness in his struggle if he accepts his fate, if he acknowledges the absurd, and continues to push the rock with defiance. He asserts his freedom in this way. Camus does not tell us to despair in the face of meaninglessness, he urges us to embrace it and create meaning through our own actions. But what does it mean to live authentically in an absurd world? Kierkegaard, often considered the father of existentialism, argued that most people live in what he called the aesthetic life, where they seek pleasure, distraction, and social acceptance. However, true fulfillment, he believed, comes from the ethical life, where one takes responsibility for their actions, and ultimately the religious life, where one makes a personal leap of faith. While Kierkegaard's perspective was rooted in Christianity, his idea of personal responsibility remains a cornerstone of existentialist thought. Nietzsche, on the other hand, took a radically different approach. He proclaimed the death of God, meaning that traditional religious and moral structures were losing their power over people's lives. In their place, he introduced the idea of the Übermensch, or the Overman, an individual who creates their own values and rises above societal norms. Nietzsche saw existential freedom as the ultimate challenge. Without a divine authority to dictate meaning, humans must construct their own. He warned, however, that many people would fall into nihilism, believing that life has no purpose. Existentialists argue that the response to this nihilism is not despair, but action. It is the responsibility of each person to define their existence. Freedom, however, comes with anxiety. Sartre describes this feeling as nausea, a deep awareness of the weight of existence. When we truly recognize our freedom, we realize that there is no safety net, no external force to guide our decisions. Every choice we make is a reflection of who we are. This is why Sartre speaks of bad faith, a condition where people deceive themselves into believing they are not free, that they must follow societal expectations or external rules. He gives the example of a waiter who plays the role of a waiter too perfectly, reducing himself to nothing more than his job, denying his full humanity to live authentically. Sartre insists we must embrace our freedom, take responsibility for our actions, and accept that we alone create our identity. This philosophy, though demanding, offers incredible power. It means that our past does not define us. It means that we are not bound by labels, expectations, or the scripts that society hands us. Existentialism does not promise an easy life, it promises a real one. Existentialism forces us to confront the reality of freedom, responsibility, and meaning in a world that does not inherently provide them. As we continue exploring this philosophy, we must now consider its impact on our modern lives, the way it shapes our relationships, our careers, and our pursuit of happiness. One of the key existentialist ideas is the notion of radical freedom. Sartre famously said, "Man is condemned to be free." This might sound paradoxical. How can freedom be a condemnation? The answer lies in the weight of responsibility that comes with true freedom. When there is no higher power or predetermined destiny guiding us, every decision we make becomes our own. This means that we cannot blame fate, society, or even our past experiences for who we are. Each moment presents us with a choice, and in making those choices, we define ourselves. But this freedom can be overwhelming. Sartre describes the feeling of vertigo of possibility, where we stand at the edge of infinite choices, realizing that nothing is stopping us from becoming anything we want, except our own hesitation. This is why many people fall into what existentialists call bad faith, choosing to deceive themselves into believing that they have no choice, that they are victims of circumstance. A person who stays in an unfulfilling job because they believe they must, or someone who follows societal expectations without question, is acting in bad faith. Existentialism challenges us to reject these illusions and take full ownership of our lives. But what does this mean in practical terms? It means that we must constantly examine our beliefs, our desires, and our motivations. Are we making choices that align with our true selves? Or are we simply following the script that has been given to us? This is particularly relevant in the modern world, where social media, cultural norms, and economic pressures push people into predefined roles. Existentialism reminds us that we do not have to accept these roles. We can redefine ourselves at any moment. Consider relationships. Love, in existentialist thought, is not about finding the one or fulfilling a predetermined destiny. It is about choice. Every day, we must actively choose to love, to commit, to engage with another person authentically. Simone de Beauvoir, a key existentialist thinker, explored the idea of love as an act of freedom rather than possession. She argued that in a truly authentic relationship, both partners must remain independent and free, choosing each other not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. This challenges traditional notions of romance, where people often seek security and certainty. But existentialism tells us that there is no absolute certainty in love, just as there is none in life. Instead, we must embrace the unpredictability, the risk, and the responsibility that come with human connection. The same principle applies to work. In a world where careers are often seen as a means to an instability, success, or social status, existentialism asks us to reconsider our relationship with labor. Are we pursuing careers that reflect our authentic selves, or are we merely conforming to expectations? Sartre's idea that existence precedes essence applies here as well. We are not defined by our jobs or titles unless we allow ourselves to be. A person is not a lawyer, an artist, or a teacher by nature. They become one through their choices and actions. But what happens when we feel lost? When we cannot find meaning in our work, our relationships, or our daily routines? This is where existentialist thinkers like Camus offer guidance. His idea of the absurd reminds us that life does not come with a prepackaged meaning. We must create it ourselves. If the world feels meaningless, that does not mean we should surrender to despair. Instead, it is an opportunity to rebel against meaninglessness by engaging in life with full awareness. This can be seen in creative expression, in art, in personal projects, in the simple act of choosing to wake up each morning and live with intention. The absurd hero, like Sisyphus, does not find meaning handed to him. He creates it in the act of pushing the rock up the hill, knowing full well that there is no final destination. This philosophy is not always easy to accept. It demands courage. It asks us to let go of comforting illusions and embrace the uncertainty of life. But in doing so, it offers us something profound, a chance to live fully, without excuses, without regrets, and without fear of the unknown. As we approach the final part of this exploration, let's reflect on how existentialism can be applied in times of crisis, in moments of doubt, and in the search for personal transformation. As we reach the final part of our exploration of existentialism, we must consider its implications in our everyday lives, especially in times of crisis, doubt, and transformation. Existentialism is not merely a set of abstract ideas. It is a way of living, a perspective that forces us to face reality with honesty and courage. In moments of despair, when the world feels chaotic and meaningless, existentialist philosophy offers an unexpected source of strength. Many people struggle with feelings of emptiness, with questions like, what is the purpose of my life? Or, Why should I keep going? Existentialism does not give an easy answer, but it provides a powerful realization. The fact that life has no predetermined meaning is not a curse, it is an opportunity. Think of a person who has lost everything: a job, a relationship, a sense of identity. In traditional ways of thinking, this might be seen as failure, a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. But existentialism sees it differently. In every moment of loss, there is also an opening, a space where one can recreate oneself. If nothing is given, then everything is possible. This is what Camus meant when he wrote about the idea of rebellion. Not rebellion in the sense of violence or destruction, but a deep, personal defiance against meaninglessness. If the universe does not provide meaning, then we must create our own. If life does not come with inherent purpose, then we must choose a purpose that is meaningful to us. One of the most famous existentialist figures, Viktor Frankl, survived the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp and later wrote about his experiences in man's search for meaning, despite witnessing unimaginable suffering. He argued that even in the worst circumstances, a person can find meaning not from external circumstances, but from their inner response to those circumstances, even in suffering. One can choose dignity, even in darkness. One can find a reason to continue. This applies to all of us, in both extreme and ordinary situations. If we feel trapped in a job we dislike, in a life that feels monotonous, in relationships that do not fulfill us, existentialism reminds us that we are never truly trapped. We always have a choice. We can walk away. We can redefine ourselves. We can start again. There is no fate that binds us, only the choices we make. But this freedom comes with a weight. It means we can no longer blame others for our unhappiness. It means we cannot wait for someone to save us, to give us meaning, to show us the way. We must be our own guide. Sartre calls this the burden of responsibility. It is both terrifying and liberating. And yet, many resist this idea. Why? Because certainty is comforting. Many people prefer to believe that life has a fixed path, that society, religion, or destiny will give them a purpose. Existentialism challenges this comfort and forces us to stand alone, to recognize that we are the authors of our own existence. This is not an easy path. It requires constant self-reflection, a willingness to accept failure, and the strength to move forward even when the world seems indifferent. But in doing so, we gain something invaluable: the ability to live authentically, to be fully present in our own lives, to engage with the world not as passive observers, but as active creators. Jean-Paul Sartre's famous phrase, "Existence precedes essence," captures this perfectly. We are not born with a predefined purpose. We create our essence through action, through experience, through the choices we make every single day. Simone de Beauvoir took this idea further, applying it to social structures and the roles imposed on individuals. She argued that we are not simply what society labels as man, woman, worker, citizen. We must go beyond these roles and define ourselves on our own terms. This is the essence of existential freedom, to live not as we are told to live, but as we choose to live, to reject conformity, to embrace uncertainty, to forge a path that is uniquely our own. And so, as we conclude this exploration, the final question is not, what is the meaning of life? But rather, what meaning would you create for yourself? The answer is yours alone. No one else can decide it for you. No philosopher, no book, no teacher, only you.